Hello everybody, and thank you for joining us at this Occupational Health and Safety Management Committee ISO TC 283 webinar on the implementation guidance for users of our management system standard ISO 45001. While people are still joining, I will go through some basic housekeeping. This is a listen-only webinar. It's being recorded. That means you won't be able to verbally speak to our experts today. However, we do want it to be interactive. So please use the Q&A function for any questions or comments that you may have, and do that throughout the session. We will come to them as they seem appropriate throughout our presentation and our discussions. Do let us know as well through the Q&A function if you're having any technical issues, because we have a technical support team sitting in the background waiting to help you, and we can usually help you resolve things. This is a CPD recognised event, so when you get your feedback survey afterwards, please request your certificate, and on completion of that survey you'll also get access to the recording and a copy of the slides that you'll see today. Thank you very much. So now I would like to introduce you to our panel. If Lionel Haslayati and Stefan would like to turn their cameras on while I introduce myself. My name is Sally Swingewood. I'm the Committee Manager for the Occupational Health and Safety Management Committee ISO TC 283, and I'm also a Lead Standards Development Manager for the UK National Standards Body, BSI. If I could come to you now, Lionel.
Thank you, Sally. I'm Lionel Sematuro, as Sally said. Currently, I live in Rwanda and I'm in the mining sector, currently overseeing business activities of one of the biggest mines in Rwanda. I have 12 experience in professional businesses, and I have been participating in the standard development activities at national and international level. As I said, I live in Rwanda, and I'm founder member of Rwanda Occupational Health and Safety Association. Currently, I'm the convener of Developing Countries Coordination Group under ISO TC 283. I have a bachelor degree from Morocco, a master's degree from Morocco, and an MBA from University of People from USA. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lionel. And to Lala, please.
Hi everyone, my name is Haslayati. You can call me Lala. I'm from Malaysia. I work as a consultant for Shamsi Sinar Berhad, where I work with multi-sectoral clients in providing consultancy, auditing services related to integrated management system in Malaysia and other countries in Southeast Asia. I also provide consultation and advice in developing sustainability framework and also sustainability reporting in Malaysia. I've been a member of the National Mirror Committee here in Malaysia for TC 283, and Malaysia Technical Expert for ISO TC 283 since 2018. Thank you.
I think I'll take over there, even if I don't see Sally moving right now. So my name is Stefan Larsson. I'm based in Sweden. I have worked with occupational health and safety and management systems longer than I care to admit. It's at least 30 years now. And I come from a background 20 years in heavy industry in a global multinational, but for the last 10 years I've been working with many different clients around the world. And I think the good thing for me as coming from a global multinational is I had the opportunity to work in many different parts of the world with production, with sales, with global functions and so on. So that was a good background. Now, for the last 3 years, I've been project lead and convener for the technical committee, the working group that has been developing 45002. We are, to be honest, a little late because this ISO 45001 standard was published in 2018, so it's 4 years ago soon, or 3.5 years ago. But we needed a long time. It's the first occupational health and safety standard that ISO has developed. So that is my background. Thank you.
Thank you all very much, and I apologise for my own technical glitch there, but I am back with you. If we can go on, please. So today we're going to be talking about implementation of ISO 45001, and I'm sure most people on this call already know what it is, but just in case you don't, it's the first global standard providing requirements for an occupational health and safety management system. And it's intended to help organisations of all kinds, all sizes, all sectors to improve their health and safety performance and protect all types of workers. And it is designed so organisations develop a management system which works for them and for their context. So let's go on and talk a little bit about ISO 45002. I know, Stefan, you mentioned it, but let's tell people a little bit more.
No, I just mentioned my role in it, but regarding the 45002, I think it's an important step here. I mean, because as I mentioned, 45001 is the first ISO standard on occupational health and safety, and we do introduce a lot of things there, which may be a challenge for many organizations. It's hard to write an international standard that applies to all types of organizations, that applies to all types of businesses and all different circumstances or contexts that different organization is in. So we've been working now for 3 years with representation from more than 25 different countries. And that includes people like the ones involved in this seminar, like Lionel and Lala, who have been very helpful in structuring this guidance standard and develop it to the point where it's ready for publication, or at least for getting approval from the ISO world to approve this new standard by the end of this year, I hope. Day before Christmas Eve is the last voting day for the national bodies, and then we hopefully get to publication early next year. I think what is a bit unique to this guidance standard compared to some others you may have seen for quality management or environmental management and so on is that it's really filled with real life examples. Not only the things that Lala, Lionel, and me and others agreed to, but also other things that means that, oh, I've never thought of that. That may be a good idea. The intention of all these examples is to give people food for thought, to discover things they've never thought about. Okay, that's one way of doing it that I never tried. And that means that we can give some guidance, not only to new organizations developing this for the first time, also to old, if I may say so, organizations that has been working for 5 or 10 or 20 years with occupational health and safety, to rethink, think outside the box to see what can be done differently to improve the occupational health and safety. Because of course the purpose of this is to keep people safe in the organization. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan, but don't go away. I'd like to start at the very beginning for those people who perhaps might be new to this. What is a management system? What does that mean in terms of health and safety?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and working with different organizations, I do see different opinions on this. Unfortunately, it shouldn't be, because a management system means that you manage your organization in a systematic way. It's that simple. If you just manage it ad hoc, I hope you don't. If you do, then it's not a systematic management. But if you do this in a systematic way, then it's a management system. And then if you even do it according to a structure in an international standard, then it would be a management system in accordance with, for instance, ISO 45001 or 9001 or 14001 and so on and so forth. So I think that's a basic point, and what it means that what do you do to improve, for instance, in this case, occupational health and safety? How do you work with these things? So a lot of elements there saying, okay, you should do this, we should do that. We have operational control, we have maybe internal reviews and so on. And if you follow the structure of 45001, then you have lots of these, I would call them building blocks in place. Then you can divide the different big building blocks into small building blocks, and then you come into the different requirements stated in ISO 14001 to make sure that you were working in a systematic way in your management system. The management system can be separate for one discipline, but mostly it's used together to build things together. I mean, you typically don't have many different management systems in an organization or a company. Hopefully you have one. And then you may combine, okay, here is how we work with environmental, here is how we work with quality, and here we work with occupational health and safety or energy or HR or whatever the discipline or topic is. And then you start to combining those together to work in a holistic way. And then you reach to a point where you can say, we have an integrated management system, which I think is something which is really good for all organizations, because sometimes I see an organization having a beautiful occupational health and safety management system, which is completely detached from the normal way of working for the organization or the main business processes. And that is, in my view, very dangerous for the organization, and especially for occupational health and safety. Thank you. I think you're on mute, Sally.
I am. Thank you, Stefan. The first thing we tend to think about when we are looking at implementing any kind of management system standard to build into what is hopefully, as you say, an integrated system for our whole organisation is scope. It's the first clause in ISO 45001. What does it mean, Lala? What is the scope of your management system? We have a scope of a standard. This is what it covers. But what is the scope of a management system for your organisation?
Okay, scope is basically talking about how an organization actually making decision about what its OH&S management system will cover and not cover. It's about determining the limit or boundary of its OH&S management and deciding how far they should go in including their processes, services, and activity in their own OH&S management system. So usually what should happen is the main rule is the organization should actually include anything that can impact their OH&S performance. So although there is allowance to exclude, however, organizations should actually include everything that within their control, and also for those that they cannot control, but they can influence through their business relationships, such as if they are the client or they are the contractor, they should also include those activity, processes, and services in the scoping of their OH&S management system. The reason why this is important, scoping is very important, because the level of detail, complexity of how they're going to develop procedures, control, how far or how many documented information they need to prepare, and the amount of resources needed to implement if an effective OH&S management system is also influenced or depending to the an accurate scoping of OH&S management system. So basically that is my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Lala. I'm going to come to Lionel next and then Stefan. Lionel, is it always a problem if people limit the scope of their management system? For example, when they're first starting out, is it always better to try and cover everything, or Is it sometimes okay to start in a more limited way and then build on it?
Thank you, Sally. As Lala said, defining the management system scope is key when developing an effective management system. It's the responsibility of the organization just to determine its boundaries, as Lala said, and applicability using the outputs that is given in the articles 4.1 and 4.2 while considering its activities. As I said, these articles talk about how the organization needs to understand its context and also the need of expectation of workers and the other interested parties. The credibility of the organization OH&S management system, and again, will depend on the choice of its boundaries set, as I previously said. The scope should not be used to exclude activities, products, services that have or can impact the organization OH&S performance, or to evade any legal requirement or other requirement. As Lala said again, the scope is basically a factual or representative statement of the organization operations, including within its OH&S management system boundaries, and that should not mislead the interested parties mentioned above. As an example, if the organization changes its sphere of control, influence, expands, or contracts of its operation, the scope must be reconsidered along with other changes like that too can affect the OH&S management system. Thank you.
Thank you, Lionel. Anything to add, Stefan?
I think Lala and Lionel put it very well. I think one thing maybe that is fundamental for how you can start working with this, that it is really up to the organization to decide, okay, we want to limit the occupational health management system to one factory or to a sales organization or to our R&D department or even to the canteen, just to start somewhere and to see where our challenges are, and then going forward, hopefully in the end, to cover all activities, all processes, all sites, and everything within the organization. So it's really important to understand. I mean, sometimes you can scare organizations away to see, oh, this is so big, this is so much. When they start dipping their toes in this by including one part of the organization, then they say, oh, it wasn't so difficult, and we do get some benefits from that. And that's a very good starting point, in my view, for many organizations, even though I like to see organizations move very quickly from a smaller scope to the complete scope. Thank you.
Thanks, Stefan. And it was one of our conversations, wasn't it, in the development of 45001, that we'd much rather an organisation picked it up and made a start than worried about doing it perfectly immediately and going for certification for their 43 sites in 17 countries. That wasn't what it was about. It's the steady journey of improving your health and safety performance that really matters. So on that, sorry, go ahead.
One more thing, Sally. You know, since you mentioned certification, the standard obviously doesn't mention certification anywhere. It's just one of the ways external certification can be used to have a sanity check on what you've actually done. And you can use that in different ways. But for me, the whole process and even the internal audit stuff is like an internal certification. Is this what the top management wanted with the management system? Do we protect people and so on? So we can start on a very low level and then go on with that. Thank you.
Thank you. But I'd like to carry on with you, if you don't mind, Stefan. Why is it so important for organisations to tailor their management system to their own context? What does context mean? That sometimes confuses people.
Yes, it does. I would say that to any organization, context is it's not a new animal here in the zoo. It's just what you've already been doing, because when you started working with things, you see which are our customers, which are our records on things, what kind of processes do we have, where do you have the big occupational health and safety issues, how well do we work with psychological health and safety, how well do we work with including minorities in our work, how well do we work in incorporating sales or people working in other places than our own stuff and so on. All of that is the context analysis, or making a first review of where you are. The standard is very simple on that. It doesn't say anything that you need to document anything. Many organizations, when, in my view, my experience, when they have worked many years with this and they come to a new requirement like context, they say, what is this? Is this something we need to do? And I usually tell them, I'm sure you did that when you started building the occupational health and safety management system. And there is no, if you just can explain it, then it's not to yourselves and to others, then that's not an issue. If you can't explain it, then of course it's an issue, because then it was only picking things from the air. What are we already doing? But if you have done a context analysis, then you've already done it. There's nothing new there with these requirements. So I think that's a good starting point to say that the context can be anything that impacts how the occupational health and safety management system can deliver what is called the intended results. It used to be intended outcomes. These words keeps changing, but what it means that what is the intention of your management system? What do you want to do? And the standard gives some guidance saying, well, it's supposed to improve your occupational health and safety performance, which is good, which means keep people from getting hurt in different ways, and then, or ill health and so on. And the other one is to fulfill legal requirements or other requirements, which may be important for your organization. And the third one is to meet your objectives. Some of these can be said to involve the same thing. Doesn't really matter, but don't forget these three things and look at, okay, what are we doing that helps with these three dimensions of our management system intended results? Thank you. Well, yeah, I should say, because we're talking about 45,002, I almost forgot that. And 45,002 gives some examples saying, okay, you can do a simple brainstorming with key people saying, okay, these are the things we should focus on an overall level. You can do a SWOT analysis, a PESTEL analysis, or call it whatever you want. Or you can do a more thorough risk and opportunities analysis already there to see what do we need to focus on. Don't go into the finer details of legal requirements or finer details of hazards. Like in this process, people can fall or they can be harassed and so on. Just say that there may be these issues in different processes, in different activities and so on. So what do we need to do, how to deal with those? And then by some strange coincidence, you actually pick up things which are both risks and opportunities, which is another headache for some organizations that have typically been focused on negative things. Which I think is sad when it comes to occupational health and safety, because there are so many opportunities, not only the flip side of risk, but opportunities for improving the management of these things and so on. So context is very important to set the overall structure of what you will be doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. So it's basically about who you are, what you do, that kind of thing, and what can affect what you're doing, and the people you can affect. Lala, can you give us perhaps some examples from Malaysia, where you're based, of the different types of context that affects the way people build their management system?
Okay, here in Malaysia, one of an example of issue is the use of migrant workers. We heavily depending on them for a lot of manual labor, low-paid jobs, general works in multiple sectors such as manufacturing, construction, service sector, etc. And looking at this particular issue, we can see here in Malaysia, different sector or even different company in the same sector actually manage migrant workers safety and health issue differently. Although they actually similar in their business activity. For example, in manufacturing, a lot of our workers actually, business actually depending on migrant workers. In plantation and agricultural, 25% of the workers are actually migrant workers. 1/3 of our 3.2 million migrant workers actually in service sector, for example. And we can see different industry manage their OH&S issue related to these workers differently. For example, in manufacturing, we can see the emphasis on occupational health of migrant worker is much better compared to the construction. But because of the law being improved or amended last year, we can see there's a lot of emphasis and effort currently done by construction activities or businesses to improve occupational health of migrant workers. Another area is the well-being of workers, especially migrant workers. Previously, focus on the living condition, which also influence their well-being working here in Malaysia, are basically managed well by the plantation businesses. Because of the legal requirement imposed by the government since 1990s. However, the last 2 years, we can see a lot of improvement happen in other sectors also related to the living condition and the well-being of this migrant worker because of the improvement again in the minimum accommodation requirement imposed by the government back in 2021. And to be surprised, this particular law was enforced during the COVID pandemic session, where a lot of companies having various limitation in terms of resources, capacity building because of the COVID pandemic and all the restriction in terms of quarantine and movement. However, I can see a lot of improvement slowly done by the company, different ways because of different sector and different contexts, but focusing on improving the safety and health of the migrant workers in Malaysia. So for that particular one issue, I can see a lot of things happening differently with different level of emphasis, but all is focusing to achieve the same intended outcome: prevention of injury and ill health, and also ensuring continuous OH&S performance in their business activity. Thank you.
Thank you, Lala. Lionel, you run our Developing Countries Coordination Group. Is context always very different in developing countries, for example, compared to those countries with really well-established historical occupational health and safety legislation, protections, that kind of thing? Does it vary a lot?
Thank you, Sally. As Stephen said, context is really essential and is fundamental to defining the scope of the management system. And that's what is really nice with the new standard, as it is not really made for only developing countries, or for developed countries. It is also help developing countries just to establish and achieve the intended outcomes. There are differences, of course, when it comes to legal framework, efforts to implementing laws, some laws that are too strict in one country to another, fragmented laws, lack or availability of required skills, capacity in financial means, different priorities when it comes to different governments, to accept culture. Sometimes you find developing countries is really something new, availability or use of technology. There are many examples that really differentiate developing and developed countries. But in any case, it is the responsibility of the organization just to understand its context. Because it is really the fundamental part just before establishing an effective management system. It is therefore needed just to have a procedure in place just to that outlines processes for identifying and determining all internal and external issues or interested parties requirement processes that relate to the management system and which can affect or influence the strategic directions. So all those examples can really influence the OH&S management system and can make it easier or made difficult the process just to achieve the intended outcome. Just to summarize, there are some differences, of course, in developing and developed countries, but the standard is made for all companies, either in developed or in developing countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Leonard, because of course, every organisation has risks, right? It's just the nuance that is important. And on the slide now, we've got some of the kind of questions that you can ask when you're doing that brainstorming that Stefan mentioned. And 45002 is very much aimed at everybody, isn't it, Stefan? It's in contrast, for example, to the handbook that the committee produced for small businesses. So we'll come to small businesses in a minute. So I'm going to ask Lala the kind of way that this should be done for a smaller business as opposed to perhaps a larger business. Perhaps, Stefan, you could start there.
Yes, thank you. Yes, that is, of course, one of the challenges when you're developing a handbook that is aimed at everybody, from the small mechanical shop to a huge multinational on with that in case usually has all these different parts in it and so on. But the context analysis is good. I like, you mentioned the handbook there, and I like to see also 45001 as a handbook, because it gives guidance to an organization saying, okay, what do you need to do to build a strong occupational health and safety management system? These are the building blocks that you need to have in place. And my advice to organizations, which I think we mimic in 45002, is that don't use the structure in 45001 to build a management system. You do it according to what you have, what you do, and your circumstances. And that is the context. And here are some examples on the slide, what you can ask yourselves. I had a work with top management of a smaller organization and industry just a week ago, and I asked those 4 or 5 people in top management, what do you think can stand in the way for keeping all your workers and other people safe? What can stand in the way or making sure that people are healthy during the work and so on? So it sort of loosened their tongues, and we got lots of input into this to see, okay, they thought this would be important, this would be this and that. And that was great input to start building the management system there. And then top management felt that this was actually something they were involved in. It's not something an occupational health and safety engineer or a consultant has constructed for us, because this is the basis for the management system. And 45002 gives you good advice, I think, on how to do a context analysis, that you can do it on a small level, on a large level, you can do it very systematically or advanced, or you can do it just as the framework. But it also clarifies that the result here is not standalone. The result from the context analysis, whether it's a big analysis or just a conversation, it flows into the other parts. It gives you who are our interested parties, which are the main people, main organizations that are interested in how we work with occupational health and safety. It gives you input to the scope to say, okay, we should start here because we don't have so much competence or resources, or we do have competence and resource, so we can start with a much larger part, goes into the resource here, but also the culture of the organization. And then you go into things like complexity of the supply chain and the environment, the business environment that you work in. And you look at the diversity of workers. Do we have specific issues? Because we have, like Lala said, on migrant workers, do we have specific issues with people who are disabled, or specific issues with a history of harassment, with these psychosocial issues and so on? So that puts the framework, the basis for the management system, and then you start to build from that. But from now, it also mentions in 45001, now and then you go back, keep this alive. Don't make it so complex that it becomes a one-off, that you do it once and then after 4 years you discover this file where it says something about context. Don't do that. Instead, go back and see, why didn't we think about this obstacle to efficient occupational health and safety? If we missed that, maybe we missed another thing, and so on. So I think this is a very valuable start to give you the sort of helicopter perspective on occupational health and safety in the organization. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. And we're beginning to get some live questions through. So I'm going to ask a specific question to you, Lala. One of our attendees has recently started as the health and safety manager in a local authority, local government. It's kind of medium-sized operation, and there's no health and safety management system standard. This person's role is mainly looking after buildings and assets, residential and commercial buildings. Where would you advise our attendees start in terms of getting a management system in place that works for them? What are the kind of questions that this person can start by asking in terms of context and determining the scope?
So that's a good question, because and this actually an interesting sector. So when, as a medium-sized organization, you may want to start by asking what actually your organization do. What are the activities that within your control and within your influence, which maybe you outsource to somebody else, etc. Where you do it, the location, the geography of it, and who are actually those people that can get hurt through your organization activities and processes. You may want to also consider area that you can improve within your control, or maybe you cannot improve, but you can only influence, such as maybe your contractors, or maybe the community you are serving, or tenants of the building, for example. So these are basically the type of question that you usually can ask. Sometimes you may want to use some assessment, like what the method that Stefan was saying, PESTLE or SWOT analysis, that will actually provide you a more structured method in determining the issues, external, internally, the interested parties, and also their needs and expectations that can actually become part of your scoping, and also the things, the input to your planning of your OH&S management system. But talking about guidance, you may want to look into the use of our 45,001 handbook for small organization, where the document actually have sort of providing a bit more clear guidance and structure, such as why each clause is important, what are the suggested implementation approaches for each particular clauses. And we also provided sometimes also information about what you can consider. For example, in the handbook, we actually have a list of external, internal issue that you can consider as an organization as a starting point. If you wanted to do this, you want to embark this journey of implementing OH&S management system. However, when you talk about context, and especially when you are not a big company and medium organization or even small organization, do not perceive that the smaller you are, the simpler the context is. Because sometimes you may have a simpler list of internal, external issue, but you may have a complex list of internal interested parties or needs and expectation, or maybe you have a even more diluted influence in certain activity that actually high risk. In my experience previously in my work in property development, property management, one of our challenges is the use of informal workers for certain works like pesticide control or gardening, etc. And as we know, this kind of work use a lot of chemicals. And to manage informal workers doing all this manual labor, which is quite considered unskilled. However, in managing chemical, we know there's a lot of inherited risk, hazard, etc. So in Malaysia, there's a lot of use of informal workers. So capacity building is something that you may have to work on if you choose to use informal workers when you do this kind of activity that may have high risk in terms of consequence to health and also safety of the particular workers that you are using. So hence use all this guidance, ISO 45002, even the handbook that provide all this information for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lala. And I wonder, Lionel, do you have anything to add? Do you have any guidance for our attendee who's just started in a job where their organisation has no management system in place at the moment? Anything you'd like to add to what Lala has said?
I think Lala just clarified it, but as we said, the handbook really provides the details of how being small, being in your company, being a big company, the guidance is quite clear how just each company can really follow the requirement just and implement it, because the standard is made for all companies, being small, being new. The most important part is just understanding the scope and the interested parties' needs and what to be dealt with. I like giving example of what we do here. How, for example, just the mining case, where the business I do today, it's a business that started long time ago, and currently we are dealing with a lot of legacy issues. Well, most of the employees in the business are the people that really never applied. Safety is something new; it's a new concept for them. But again, when you follow the guidelines, it is really it provides clear guidance how we can implement. It's all about understanding the needs of interested and understanding the context, because the context matters when implementing the effective OH&S management system. Thank you.
Thank you, Lionel. And I'd like us to look a little bit more now at those micro organisations and also non-traditional organisations. And I might come to you first, Stefan, if you do not mind. We've seen over the last however many years a move from very hierarchical organisations to flatter management structures, and yet our standards still talk about top management. And also, we know that 95% or so of organisations in the world are very small. They're less than 10 people, less than 5 people. How would you start with an organisation like that, Stefan?
Well, the first step would be to ask them to look at what they already do, because I mean, you can say that all organizations do work with health and safety to a certain degree or in some level, because otherwise people won't stay there anyway. If you exclude some of the really not acceptable practices in mining in North and South America and so on, where people die like flies almost. But if you exclude those, so most serious organizations do have occupational health and safety management in place. That is not saying that it's very good occupational health and safety management, but they do have it in place. And that is what they should build on, even if they are a very, very small organization. Also, most organizations actually try to follow the law. So looking into what is the legal requirements where you work, and maybe they operate in different parts of the world, even they are small. They may have sales staff going around to other places. What is relevant for them? So it's what you take a hold on, what you have now, and see, compare that to what is stated in the building blocks in 45,001 with the help of guidance from 45,002. How can you improve and get better? because nobody is perfect, and most organizations are so far away from perfect that they can't even spot perfect in the horizon. So there are many things to do in all organizations, and I would really love to work with organizations that are 10 people or 15 people to build occupational health and safety in that. It's a much bigger challenge, of course, and it's much more difficult to change one of the really large organizations, to change how General Electric works with this, or how Walmart works with that. That that would be a huge challenge. But I think it's really important for the 95% organizations out there that are small and medium-sized organizations to work with that. That is even more important than having the big behemoths working even better with this, because most of those have the basics in place, but others don't. So I think taking a look at what you have and start from there would be a great start for any organization.
Thank you, Stefan. Thank you. You're absolutely right. Of course, smaller organizations, when something goes wrong, the effect is proportionally much bigger than in
Exactly.
Walmart or General Motors. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Lionel, I wanted to come to you, and let's just think for a moment about these non-traditional organizations. We know from conversations we've had with health and safety experts from different countries in Africa that trying to look after people in the gig economy, not is a real issue. And we've also got an increasing amount of workers who are working on platform organizations like Uber. So they're not employed as such, perhaps may not be covered by the law, but there is an organization that they are working on behalf of. Can you give any advice on how we can help those organizations that have those different working models to look after the people who are working for them, whether they are employed or not?
Thank you, Sally. And I think that's really a good question. And as you said, they are structured and regulated in a specific way, and their business is quite different from the normal or traditional organization. As you said, this is basically the tradition. I mean, there's quite smaller than traditional businesses, and probably just require less of startup commitment. But as it was previously said, it's all about understanding. When we talk about the context, it's all about understanding the needs and the environment the business is operating in. So it's all about understanding the risk related to the nature of the business, regardless the size. The most important part is understanding what can affect or can be affected while just doing my business. So this organization also needs to understand what are the external and internal issues related to or relevant to its purpose. And coming back just to non-traditional organizations, the fact that they are located probably within or inside other large buildings or other large environments, they are advisable just to conduct regular review of their context and what can affect their business or their operations. Thank you.
Thanks, Lionel. Lala, I saw you nodding away. Is there anything you would like to add to what Lionel said?
Okay, in terms of this small organization and also how the context can be affected either by this kind of aspect. In Malaysia, for example, I've worked with a lot of small, medium, even micro organization. I've worked with a company who actually owned by a family of 5. And because of the culture of Malaysia, we respect our elders. We respect not even even if the elders who are stranger, if we are working with them, we respect their decision, we listen to their advice. So this culture of not questioning the senior or elderly people, making there's a lack of empowerment among the younger workers who may have more ideas in terms of implementing controls related to safety and health because of their updated understanding about what is happening in the business. So in my experience, even for small or even big companies, this culture, the culture of not questioning authority, and another thing is the not even questioning those with power, not even about age, about power and position, causing a lack of empowerment. It reduces effectiveness of an implemented control measure. Sometimes, even in Malaysia, hierarchical style of management, we are not really open to flat structure yet. It's not a popular idea here in Sally. So I've seen cases where it affects a timely response. Although the control should actually by theory is effective, but because of this hierarchical style, the fact that nobody actually respond timely because they, for example, if the incident happened at night or the hazard actually happened at night, they wait until the office hour because they don't want to disturb their supervisor. It actually create issues in terms of the effectiveness of the management system. So yeah, sometimes the where this is happening, the culture, the location, the environment, the interested party involved does affect the management system of an organization. And thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Culture is so important. It is part of your context questions. What is there in your context that may affect how effective your management system is? So do bear that in mind. And another part of that is your legal requirements, your regulatory requirements, and of course they vary a lot. Lionel, how much do you see the law varying in the countries you're working with, and how does it affect how people put in place a health and safety management system?
Giving examples from my own experience where I live in Rwanda, as I said, occupational health and safety was a new concept, wasn't really at the center of business priorities. Coming back to laws, laws are fragmented. Enforcement is really weak. So it requires really commitment from the business owners really just to take that lead and understand the importance of establishing an effective management system. But in brief, as we know, all these legal systems differ from one country to another. In most of cases, sectors are regulated differently. And as we said previously, enforcement also differs. So I can give you an example now, but things are changing. Giving example in my country, things are changing. You can see agencies in the Charge of Occupational Health and Safety are really pushing training, awareness, enforcement of the law. But we need to understand that compliance is really fundamental to the effectiveness and stability of any system. It is therefore important, and that's what is being encouraged in our regular workshops and everything. We encourage businesses just to have an established process just to determine what are the requirements just to comply with, and how just to manage and everything. But coming back to my country, it's something really new, but the laws are being changed, and I believe with time things will change. But laws really are different, and different mechanisms in place just to enforce and comply with the laws. Thank you.
Thank you, Lionel. And I want us to move on, please, to talk a little bit about leadership and worker participation. They're really fundamental in ISO 45001. And this, again, it's culture, isn't it, Stefan? What does 45,000 do say to us? How can we meet these requirements about effective leadership, commitment, and meaningful worker consultation and participation?
Yes, that's a good question, and it's one of the more sensitive ones if you look at the cultural part, because worker participation means, in many cases, it means different things in different parts of the world, historically said. So I may do some work here in Sweden. Okay, we have a legal requirement about worker participation and consultation. It looks like this. And then I go to another part of the world where there is absolutely nothing. So you have to build from what you have. And I think the most important part to build from is the leadership and the culture of the organization. Because if you don't have that, it will fail sooner or later. You may build something with people like me or with enthusiastic occupational health and safety engineers, but if it's not really supported by the leadership, it doesn't really help in the long run. You may achieve certification, depending on the certification body you find, but you absolutely need to have the inclusion of the leadership, top management, for this to work. But that is, as you mentioned there, only the first part. The next part is to get people in the organization to be involved. They need to be involved in identifying hazards. They need to be involved in taking action to occupational health and safety, including emergency situations or uh, whatever psychosocial issues you may have. All these workers need to be involved in, but also as broad as possible in the organization. Because with the term worker in 45,001, we mean everybody from the CEO up to the janitor, I would say. I hate to use terms like down to the janitor. I would prefer to see this up to the janitor, because those are the people usually that creates value for the organization. So it's really important to get people involved in different parts of implementing the management system processes. I mean, it comes back also, now I'm maybe diluting from the topic here, but when it comes to processes, if you work with quality, you think that processes is one thing, but you also have a set of like 25 different occupational health and safety processes that are described in ISO 14001. And if you focus on getting those right, then that includes worker participation and consultation. There are two levels there. One which is about how you get in certain parts of this, you can't have participation with everybody, but you can have consultation so that things go out. It's not only workers themselves, it may be their representatives, and that is also a cultural thing. How does that work in the USA? How does it work in Middle East? How does it work in Australia or in Denmark? Because there is different approaches to representatives of the workers, and how you build some glue between these to help things to create a good foundation. But it all comes down to if you have a strong leadership commitment to that. I have one boss in my old company who was really committed to occupational health and safety, and he was it on a personal basis, because he had been injured. He was in the concrete business and he had been injured when he was younger and felt very strongly about that. So at one point, we put together the whole global management group into Lisbon in Portugal, I think. And he started by saying, okay, I have two slides to show. One is from occupational health and safety. This is what we've been doing now for 5 or 10 years. And we had a very strong result there, going downwards with people getting ill or injuries and so on. And then he showed an opposite slide with the profits of the company. And then he asked all his top management, why can't we do this as we do on occupational health and safety to really keep improving every year? Why does it fail? And that sent an extremely strong message to the organization that top management were focused on occupational health and safety, and that they were involved. They were even setting my job wasn't so difficult because top management even set bonuses based on whether they implemented OSAS 18001 in that case in different parts of the world. And they called me, what is happening? Why do we get bonuses based on occupational health and safety? We've never had anything about that. It was always profits, sales, or costs and so on. So leadership, it's so important. If you don't have it from the beginning, sometimes you don't, you start building this and then you try to find a way to show results. Because if you can show strong results, I would bet you that 99% of top managers starts to get interested if they see results, that fewer people are getting hurt, fewer people get illness in the organization, and that triggers the so it becomes a push-pull situation where you get leadership more involved, and then something happens with the management system and it develops over time. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. And we've got an interesting question that has just come in, which I would like to put to our panel. It's a situation in Australia where a small business deals with a lot of subcontractors. The contractors go into clients' homes to perform work. And this business is obliged to provide insurance and to ensure that they are competent to a determined set of competencies, but the organisation is not deemed responsible for any occupational health and safety incidents that happen on that site because they are subcontractors. What our attendee would like to know is, how can ISO 45001 and indeed the guidance in 45002 or the handbook help protect those workers, regardless of their place in the employment hierarchy, if you like, and what the law says? How can having an effective health and safety management system help protect them? I don't know who would like to pick that up first. Do you want to raise a hand?
I can start just
Sure.
by saying that 45001 and also 45002, obviously the guidance is a baseline. It's not the top level. You're allowed to do more than it's stated there, and you're allowed to do much more than is stated in the legal requirements, because usually the baseline for building a management system is to comply with the law, obviously, but then you start doing things which is more advanced than you would find in the legal requirements. And it's an interesting question. Who deemed them to be not a case for this organization to be responsible for? Because occupational health and safety, the process is described in 14001, says that, of course, if you do have processes where you direct people what to do, then you are responsible for what they do. If you tell them what to do and they don't do it and they hurt themselves, then you become responsible. If you don't give them any instructions, if you don't give them anything, I think you'd instruct them at least on the outcome of their work. And I think you can build something from that.
Thank you, Stefan. Lionel, please.
Thank you. I want just to give an example of mining businesses here, and we really use subcontractors in our business. Our site, actually, we have more than 1,200 people on a daily basis, and the half of them is subcontractors. So the responsibility just to not only comply with the safety of our employees, not only it is our responsibility, but we believe just to establish a sustainable business, we have just to take the lead and ensure the subcontractor also is really complying with all safety rules and regulations. So we really take the lead as a company, however much we subcontract the subcontractor just to take a portion of some of the of the activities of the business, but we take the lead as a company just to ensure that, because what the subcontractor is currently doing can affect even our direct employees. So we take the lead to ensure even subcontractors are complying not only by the stated laws, also by the safety rules established internally. Thank you.
One more
Thank you very
thing,
much.
Sally, just a short one. I mean, 45,001 is clear that if you have something that is outsourced, then you are responsible for the health and safety in those processes, even if the organization that you outsource to is not part of your occupational health and safety. Thank you.
Thank you. And if I could just remind everybody to mute themselves when they're not speaking, we're getting some feedback. I know it's my fault some of the time, sometimes it might be somebody else's. So if all of our panelists can just keep an eye on that, that would be great. Okay, I'd like to move us on. Time is galloping along, but we're doing well. Why is it important to take a holistic approach and identify all types of hazards and all types of risks? When I've been listening to you all today, we really have concentrated on perhaps what is mainly seen as more traditional occupational health and safety risks, but there is more to it than that, isn't there? If we can go on to the next slide while we talk, perhaps Lionel would like to start us off. Why do you think the holistic approach is so important?
Thank you, Sally. I think that's really a good question, and I strongly believe holistic approach is the right approach or strategy and approach just to identifying all types of risk. Not only it connects every department or everyone in the organization, and it promotes the involvement, as Stefan said. So this approach not only promotes the teamwork skills, because we really need to understand everyone must be part of the process. And not only it is really the right move just to identify, as we have to work as a team, first of all, and to promote the work participation, as Stephen said. But we use the use of this approach not only help just to promote the teamwork spirit, the involvement of workers at all levels, but also it helps achieving the intended goals of the OH&S management system. Thank you.
Thank you, Lionel. And Stefan, perhaps you could expand a little bit on the different types of hazards and different kinds of occupational health and safety risks beyond the physical injury, for example, or traditional illnesses, perhaps caused by inhalation, that kind of thing.
I'll be happy to do that, Sally. Looking into most organizations, still, I would say, even though there are countries where there are legal requirements on other things, but saying that most organizations focus on hazards that are energy related, which means that it could be falling from heights, it could be energy in chemical substances, it could be pinching or cutting, anything which has to do with energy levels, saying don't expose yourself to energy from a moving car or a forklift truck or whatever. But things that are beyond the energy stuff becomes ignored if you don't take this holistic approach, as you mentioned, because it's even, I mean, we have studies from World Health Organizations and so saying that the issues with health is broader and bigger than the real safety stuff. Not saying that safety is unimportant, but going into psychosocial hazards, psychosocial risks, looking into things that mean that people's well-being is put in jeopardy and they feel bad going to work, things like that. Or it's just, maybe it's just things like saying that, all right, how does infectious disease affect the organization? We also now have a discussion within the technical committee. How do we deal with climate change when it comes to occupational health and safety? Because we get all kinds of things coming from not only physical stuff like rising water levels and so on, but also disease and all that stuff. We have all the recent experience from pandemics and immigrants fleeing from parts of the world where there are wars, depending on different climate issues and so on. So there are so many things which are not directly related to machine guarding or personal protective equipment or internal transports and so on. So you really need to have a broader look outside the box where most organizations are and see what can affect the workers here in a good way or especially in the bad way. So it's really important to look broader than just safety issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. If I can come to you, Lala. Stefan has begun to touch on this, but planning is really critical, isn't it? It's not just putting controls in for what you can see right in front of you. It's that thinking about that Stefan has said. What kind of advice does 45,002 or the handbook give on planning? How can people who aren't experts, for example, begin to approach this?
Okay, planning is basically talking about how an organization determine what they want to achieve and what they need to do to meet the purpose of their OH&S management system. So when an organization plan in managing their OH&S risk, you actually decide how to use your resources to particularly improve the OH&S of your workplace and what action to be taken at the right time, the right activity, issues, etc. So planning should be done ongoing, even if you see there's no physical or an obvious change happen, because change is actually inevitable. Business evolve, activity change, technology actually may simplify things but create additional different type of hazards such as psychosocial hazard or even maybe biological hazard. Due to hence ongoing planning is very important for companies who are actually implementing OH&S management system, especially looking at the experience of COVID-19 that we had the last 2 years. So through using the ISO 45002 or even the handbook for small organization, there are some guidance given there about what is to be considered in planning for your OH&S management system. So for example, if the company have identified hazard and OH&S risk and develop controls according to the hierarchy of control, etc., then they have to decide on setting the objective, for example, and continuously company have to plan and also again review their planning to see whether the particular control or decision they made previous 2-3 months ago, even a few years ago, are still valid, and to continually improve by through planning again and again, and furthermore implement those plans. So in the handbook, for example, they have some information about these changes that can happen, and some advice. If you are intended to make any changes or processes, you may need to determine or examine whether those changes create further unintended consequence, because sometimes some changes, even to further improve your control for certain hazard, may create, as I said, additional hazard or even maybe create potential risk of legal compliance. Hence, do not stop planning, dear organizations. You have to do this continuously. All right, thank you.
Do not stop planning. Good advice, Lala. Lionel, how do organisations identify their hazards and then work out the controls that they need to put in place? We don't have a lot of time, but if you could give a little bit of advice, that would be really useful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I will try just to be brief while describing this process. And it is really important, and the standard itself just emphasize on this in its clause 6.121, where we need just to do the hazard identification. Basically, it is defined as part of the process used just to evaluate any situation or hazard that may have potential just to cause harm to the employees. Basically, the time is to describe the whole process just in the risk assessment. So basically, as an organization, we have to identify hazards, as Stephen described them, hazards and risks that may have potential to cause harm. Then we have just to evaluate the risks and prioritize. Then after that, we have just to put in place appropriate controls just to ensure that the hazards are eliminated if possible. So basically, the overall goal of the hazard identification is, is to find and record possible hazards that may cause harm to employees and that may be present at the workplace or the workplace. Sorry. So it may again help just the team just to understand and we need just as operation changes, the companies just to review the hazard identification, see if there is no really new hazard that may just raised by or just came with the new changes in the organization. It's really something that we have to do just to protect our workers, and this is a system. It is done in a systematic way. Thank you.
Thank you, Lionel. Stefan, you had something to add.
Yeah, just a thought, small thing there, because we're talking about 45,002 here, and I think you will find when you get to read 45,002 that, for instance, the planning part lists more than 100 different sources of potential aspects, potential hazards here. And that goes for organizational hazards, goes for psychosocial hazards, goes for many different parts beyond the normal sort of physical risks from or hazards from activities and so on. So I think that's very helpful for the organization who's working with this to look into that, see, okay, have we covered that? Have we looked at that? And build from that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And it's something that we often hear about is that organizations are very focused on, if we can go on to the next slide, please, on complying with legislation, complying with the law, meeting the requirements of 45,001. And I think as a technical committee, we are all agreed it's not about compliance, it's not about conformity, it's much more about improving your health and safety performance, looking after your workers better and better and continually improving that. Lala, would you like to comment on that?
Yes, for us, I think we in the technical committee agree that limiting what companies or organizations do on safety and health to compliance requirement may not be enough to prevent injury and ill health, or even provide a safe and healthy workplace for the workers. I give you some example, like in Malaysia previously, we have legal requirement where if you do working at height activities, the compliance requirements say you just provide safety belt. And then we learn our lesson that although the workers survive the fall, but they have very severe injury due to the limitation of using safety belt. And then it was further upgrade to, again, the compliance said after a few years, you need to use safety harness. Yes, they do survive, but in certain cases, because PPE are provision of PPE or personal protective equipment are very human dependent, ineffective selection of this safety harness can also create disability to certain people who actually survive the fall. Hence, here is my point. Compliance obligation are usually minimum bare requirement related to safety and health control. Hence, if you want to further prevent injury and ill health and provide a real safe and healthy workplace, focus on improving the control, focus to do beyond compliance sometimes, because the improvement sometimes lies in those efforts that go beyond compliance, the things that you do extra for your workplace, the things that you do extra during planning for managing those hazard and OH&S risk. So in my opinion, yes, let's focus on improvement. Yes, compliance is important, but what we can do more. And I think that is actually the intended outcome of the management system. The OH&S management system is actually to further prevent injury and ill health and provide a safe and healthy workplace. Thank you.
Okay, we only have 5 minutes left, gentlemen, but Stefan and then Lionel, if you'd like to add on the importance of improvement, that would be great. Stefan, please.
Yes, as you touched upon, Sally, the when you have a efficient occupational health and safety management system, you don't have that when you get a certificate. You don't have that when you meet the legal compliance stuff. You have that when people don't get hurt anymore and where they don't have any illnesses which is work related. So, and to be honest, 45,001 or even 45,002 and legal stuff cannot tell you the big risks you have in your organization, because it depends so specifically on what you do and how you do it and your competence and so on. So that is up to you to do. You need to comply with legal requirements, of course, but take it from there and see what you specifically need to do in your business or in your types of organization to keep people safe. That's the only thing that is the intended outcomes of all this stuff. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Stefan. Lionel, have you anything to add on this?
Please. Thank you so much, Sally. And I would conclude just encouraging organizations to do things that are right, because the aim is not only just complying or just getting certification, as Stephen said, but we need just to make the OH&S the core value of all businesses, as it guarantees the return on investment. Thank you.
That was very brief. Well done. We're gathering our time back in. I think what all of us from TC283 would say is, don't accept that people can get injured or be harmed by the work that they do. There is always something you can do, and there are always ways to make that better. So as an overarching piece of advice to everybody, don't put up with it. Our workers deserve to go home to their family following their work as well, as fit and able as they were when they turned up at the start of their working time. So let's keep working on improving it for all of us. And don't forget the psychological health and safety, because that's really, really important too. Infectious diseases are really important. We've seen what the COVID pandemic did to all of us. It's very disruptive to business for people to be ill or to be injured. This isn't just a human cost, it's a business cost too. There is no reason for you not to take this seriously. So please, please look at ISO 45002 when it is published early in 2023. The handbook for small organizations is already available. Go on the ISO website, search for 45001 small organizations, and you will find it. It is there for you now. Don't delay, get on with it. Let's keep making this world a safer place for all of us. We have a website which we'd encourage you all to have a look at, and you can also get in touch with us there. You can share your ideas, your concerns, your questions. We have hundreds of experts from 99 countries who are here to help you. So please do engage with us, and please keep in touch. We have another session starting in just over 30 minutes. So please do join us again on preventing and managing disruption in your organisation from infectious diseases. Why is this still important, even if we're learning to live with COVID-19? Do join us in 35 minutes. In the meantime, massive thank you to Lala, to Lionel, to Stefan, and to everybody who joined this session. We really appreciate each and every one of you, and I hope we see you again soon. Bye.